Hello, BookTube. I'm back with yet more books. This is my Friday Reads video. It's a little belated. I'm sorry about that. I went on a brief errand trip, hours and hours and hours ago, the very beginning of the day. And I got back, and I thought, well, it's a Friday. You're doing fine with your deadlines. Why not make a couple of videos? And I just got out of the shower. I had that wonderful, clean, cool post-shower feeling, and I was on the little couch, and where I used to film all these videos before I fell in love with filming them in this room. I was on the little couch, and there was a cool summer breeze blowing through the window right by my face, and Frida was right up on the top of the couch at that window, sort of half dozing and perking her ear up whenever anything went by of interest on the street. And I had not this MacBook, but my battered old MacBook. I had it, I was stretched out on the couch. I was propped up on pillows. I had the MacBook on my lap. I was writing. And I realized I'm just perfectly happy. I'm not gonna get up, set anything up, make videos. I'm not gonna do any of that. It can wait. And that's why these videos are going up so late. I'm sorry, but moments like that, we don't get an infinite supply of them, so I just took it while I had it. But I've got a Friday Reads video for you now, and there's a spillover in this video from the last video, the one I just made, which was a charity shop book haul that was just totally impromptu. I got, in that charity shop book haul, I got like 10 books, and of those 10 books, there were quite a few that I want to read right away. I'm actually making them part of my weekend reading. And the first one is one that I talked about in that video, Little Lord Fauntleroy, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a story of a little boy who becomes an English aristocrat, a little American boy who becomes an English aristocrat and has to go into that world and learn all about it and change it for the better. And somehow, books like that ordinarily drive me crazy because they're so saccharine, where the little child is so sweet and innocent that they fix all the impurities around them. Usually, I just hate books like that. This book, I didn't when it was done, and also Anne of Avonlea is the exact same formula, and I never hated those books. I love them. So I'm going to give that another reread. Then another one that I'm not going to put it off, because if I do, I won't do it, is The Pale King by David Foster Wallace. It's not really by him. It's a reconstruction by a friend of his of whatever the mass of notes that were left for what would have been the completed novel had David Foster Wallace not killed himself in the middle of composition. So it's a bit of a literary oddity. I can read it, and I can look for turns of phrase, great passages, interesting psychological insights, and I can also look for lines and threads flowing from the rest of David Foster Wallace's work, but I can't call this a David Foster Wallace novel, and I can't link those things directly to him because there's a huge intermediary. So nevertheless, when I first read this, I had a whole bunch of factors working for and against it. Now I'm just going to read it clean as a book, and we'll see. I'm going to try and pretend that it doesn't have David Foster Wallace's name on it. I'm going to try and pretend I don't know anything about the help of his literary friend and executor. I'm just going to read it as a book and see what this is as a book, which I have not done. So I'm going to give it a try. And then the next one, the Murders of the Rue Morgue. I found this beautiful little paperback, and I've got to read it. I've got to read it again. I'm going to fall a little behind with all of this rereading, because this is a long time of rereading that this is counting for. But I'm going to do it anyway. It's my life. It's a free country. And I've already read more new releases than... I'm going to get in new releases. We're going to get to them in this video. But the one more old book that I'm going to read is not a reread. It's something I've never read and wish I had. I feel terrible that I haven't. It's this, The Gone Away World by Nick Harkaway, whose novel Tiger Man and novel Gnomon are fantastic. So I'm expecting that this is his debut. I'm expecting this will be too. And I'm glad I have it now, because this is a fantastic author. And then, so we've got those 4 out of the way. Now we're going to move on to just 4 more. These are new. I think we've seen a lot of them on this channel before. The first one is this one. It's Maria Davana Headley's book, The Mere Wife. I think this is a debut. Let's see here. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, no, not by far. Okay. This is... elevator pitch description of this book is that it's a modern-day retelling of Beowulf. I don't know how you can do that. And it's been sitting there on the shelf, and I've been meaning to get to it long before now. And it's due right around the corner. Oh, it's due on the 17th of July. So I have a feeling this is going to be a book I want to read more than once. So I'll read this weekend and see what I make of it. Although I know one thing is going to bother me about it. It's not any fault of the book. I'm not going to hold it against the author. One thing that's going to bother me about it is that through some combination of factors, probably mailing out books. I tend to mail out books whenever I can, and not only books that people ask for, but also things I might think they like. And as a result of whatever factor, I do not currently own a copy of Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf, one of the great translations in the history of translations into English from any other language. A great work of translation, and I don't own a copy. I don't know how it happened, but I don't have a copy, and I know the Mirror Wife, I have back on the shelf somewhere. You can almost see it. That right at the tip of my finger right there is an enormous white hardcover. That thing right there. That is a volume of the complete works of Old English. And there's a whole translation of Beowulf in there that's fantastic. So I'm not without a translation of Beowulf, but I don't have the Seamus Heaney. And that's disgraceful. And it's no longer possible to pay for an international phone call to Shea Heaney to get a copy in the mail. I've just got to wait until I see one. I'm amazed that in all the months that I haven't had a copy, I haven't seen one. They used to be tripping over them, but one way or another, The Mirror Wife is certainly going to make me want to reread Beowulf. And I'll have to do with the collection volume I have there. Then the next one, I don't know if we saw this on this channel or not. This is by Dan Fesperman, and it is Safe Houses. Look at that cover. Isn't that awesome? I don't often say that about American covers. Let me see here. West Berlin, 1979. Helen Abel oversees the CIA's network of safe houses, rare havens for field agents and case officers amid the dangerous milieu of a city on the grip of the Cold War. Helen's world is upended when, during her routine inspection of an agency property, she overhears a meeting between two agents speaking a coded language that hints at shadowy realities far beyond her comprehension. Before the day is out, she witnesses a second unauthorized encounter, one that will place her firmly in the sights of one of the most ruthless and powerful men at the agency. With the help of two female colleagues, Helen goes on the run. Her attempts to expose the truth about what she has seen will create repercussions that reach across decades and continents into the present day when, in a farm town in Maryland, two people are gruesomely murdered. Now Helen's daughter, Anna, aided by a jaded Washington fixer, must chase down what is buried in her mother's past and face the chilling fact that old secrets never die. So a Cold War thriller that stresses into the present day. Probably a tad on the formulaic side, but I love stuff like this. So that's on the reading list for this weekend. Then another one, I don't know if we saw this on this channel. This is, do I have a pub sheet? Why don't you just staring at the top of my head while I read things? I guess you don't seem to mind. This is by Peter Heather, and it is Rome Resurgence, War and Empire in the Age of Justinian. A fascinating subject. I have a whole shelf of books on the Emperor Justinian and on his great general Belisarius, about whom I wrote a book. I wrote a novel. One of the only works of fiction that I've ever written in my life that nagged at me. Ordinarily, I write fiction much like Anthony Trollope did. I finish a book, I dust my hands, I put it aside, it's gone. If the people that I sent it to liked it, fine. If they didn't, fine. But I was on to the next thing. I didn't ever write novels the way Henry James wrote them, where they constantly draw to you, they speak to you, they're never quite finished. Nathaniel Hawthorne used to make a quote to that effect, that the novel's never quite done. And of course many other writers have said the same thing. And I've always thought that was either writerly falderall or the expression of a reality on a level of talent that I don't possess for writing fiction. So of course I would never experience it. And one way or another, whichever of those things is true, my novel, Belisarius, Out in the Dark, Running, is the only piece of fiction I've ever written that has continually called. I still go back to it. I still tinker with it. I don't know why. But this is a history. I had the advanced Oxford copy and I never read it. It just sat there. It was only when I got the finished copy that I realized, oh, you really need to read that. I don't know why I would need the urging, since it's a subject that I love, because Justinian is a fascinating character in his own right. One of the only people in history, in like historical periods, one of the only people who apparently naturally slept as little as I do. And it gave rise to all sorts of rumors about how he was consorting with demons late at night. But one way or another, he, in addition to writing a massively influential codex of Roman law, he also wanted to reconquer the western part of the empire. It was an amazingly ambitious thing, and he wouldn't have had a chance if he hadn't had. He had 3 fantastic generals, 2 in particular, and Belisarius was one of them, who managed to do miracles with ragtag polyglot armies that couldn't speak to each other and that were only a fraction of the size of the forces they went up against. Belisarius in particular was a tactical and strategic genius who was able to do amazing things, take amazing steps towards reconquering the Western Empire, which is it's just an unbelievable story. Reads like something out of a George R. R. Martin, and until, as with all the great nonfiction stories, you realize it's that slight sliver better because it all happened. This is an extra benefit, an extra draw for me, because I know the subject, I know the sources, I know how this author will know what he knows. The coinage, the inscriptions, the documents, the roads, the archaeological details from midden heaps and whatnot, and all of the literary stuff. I know all of that. I learned all of that stuff when I was researching for the Belisarius book. So this is going to be more like a discussion between him and me, that always feels great. When you know a historical period well enough so that you're not really concerned with keeping up with the author, that feels fantastic. And it's easy to do, keep in mind. For those of you some of you out there might be intimidated by nonfiction or reading history, it's easy to do. Remember the piece of advice that I gave for getting to the point where you can do that. Start small. Start small. Pick one person. Pick one event. Pick one thing. Read about it, and then continue to read about it, and then read more about it. And as you do that, eventually, the outer border of that thing is going to expand. You're not even going to notice it at first. But if you pick General Belisarius, or you pick the Battle of Antietam, or you pick the sinking of the Bismarck, you pick a little thing like that. The wrong thing to do is think, I need to just know all of this. The wrong thing to do is to look at it like you would a college survey course in history. That's the wrong approach. Colleges do that just because they want to cover everything. But if you want the feeling of really knowing where you stand and getting the full fascination out of the nonfiction that you read, you have to do the opposite. You have to pick something small and work your way outward. And it will happen. You read 2, 3, 4 histories on the Battle of Gettysburg. By the time you get to the end of the 4th one, you're going to know a much bigger surrounding picture than just the Battle of Gettysburg. You're going to be more familiar with a lot of other stuff, which will allow you to go on from there. Until finally, there are no holes left to fill. And all that's left is for you to get new books on your subject and be ready to be thrilled by them, or angered by them, argue with them, learn from them, change an old opinion because of them, be fully engaged with them in a way that doesn't happen with fiction. That aspect of reading nonfiction has no equivalent in reading fiction. So just, not that it's an either or, it's not us versus them, but still, that's the way I'm going to be reading a book like this, and I can't wait. It's just a thrilling feeling. And then the last thing, I don't know if we've seen it on this channel before. I read the advanced copy. I read an advanced copy and was impressed. I'm going to read the finished copy and see if there's more going on. I have a feeling there is. It's a debut novel. It's by David Chariandi and its brother. At heart, it's about... At heart, it's about 2 different boys, both of whom are not white. They are brown to black. They are the spectrum that isn't in. They're the spectrum that's just one spectrum off the spectrum of power, and they know it. They have to deal with poverty. They have to deal with the casual racism of the police. They have to deal with the casual racism of society. But there's more to them than that, and they know it. It's difficult to describe. The actual mechanics of one strand, the main strand of the plot, struck me as a little hackneyed. Sort of a, you can't go home again type thing. And I want to read this again because I have a feeling this author is smarter than I am. And so there's a strong chance that I will see stuff going on here that I didn't see the first time, which is what I love reading. That's what I love reading fiction for that, because with like I just mentioned with nonfiction, the more nonfiction you read on a certain subject, the wider the outward circumference of what you know extends. With fiction that's written really intelligently, where the author has sat for long periods of time in solitude over one paragraph before moving on to the next one, and then exhaustively rework the whole thing over and over again. With fiction like that, it's actually the opposite of what I just described for nonfiction. The outward perimeter doesn't expand, instead it contracts until finally you are like a black hole. You are bored in on that one work. And that focus, I've noticed with fiction, I don't know if this is true for you, but with me, I've noticed that with fiction that has a brain behind it, not just the latest, crime-solving cat novel, but fiction that has a brain behind it. Don't get me wrong, I love popcorn genre fiction, but fiction that has a brain behind it, where someone has sweat blood over this thing, I've noticed that the boring in, the focusing in on seeing more and more of less and less of smaller and smaller details, that tends to happen in the back of my mind instead of in the front of my mind. I don't tend to sit and think about it. Instead, I can feel the furniture shifting around back there. This is very annoying, but in a good way. And I have a feeling that's true with this book. And since it's a debut, I'm gonna give it another read this weekend. So that is my my Friday reads. We have Rome Resurgence, Justinian, a great story. Those of you who are familiar with the outlines of Justinian and his wars to reconquer the empire will know already. You can barely go wrong with the story, and I'm hoping this author doesn't. Or this author doesn't find a way to go wrong with it. Then Safe Houses by Dan Festerman, just a spy thriller that I'm going to love, I think. Brother by David Chariandri. The Mere Wife by Maria Devana Headley. A modern retelling of Beowulf. Then The Gone Away World, Nick Harkaway's debut. Murders at the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. Don't ask me why the F. Then The Pale King by David Foster Wallace. And Little Lord Fauntleroy, which you can't really see it on the spine there, but that is Little Lord Fauntleroy learning what his kingdom looks like. That is my my Friday reads, and as usual with Friday reads, I'd love to know what you're doing. What you're doing for Friday reads. Feel free. Let's talk books in the comments. But I'm gonna wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.